I wanted to talk a little bit about the different G36 mags, specifically the G36 PMAGs. There's an obvious comparison difference here between the German HK mags and the American-made mags by Magpul. Magpul has made PMAGs for a very long time, and they're very popular for AR-15s and M16s. These are the G36 mags. In fact, some of the ones that I've bought here, people mistakenly bought originally thinking they're for ARs, and they're not. They're a little bit thicker. So these will not work in an AR. They're only for the G36. And surprisingly so, they released these probably 10 years ago. And then, even now, but then especially, the G36 family of weapons was not popular for, really both law enforcement and civilians. So I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to release it. But they probably made a decent, pretty penny. And I know I bought a number of them. Between the two, there's pros and cons like with everything in life. But I prefer the German mags. The biggest reason is they just seem to work a little bit better. I've never had stoppages for either, so they're both reliable, but they just work in a little bit different way. I have had issues with the PMAGs not locking the bolt to the rear at the last round. The springs just feel a little weaker too compared to the G36 mags. So when they're brand new, they're strong, of course, but after through use, they get a little worn down, and it's not a huge issue unless you really count on that bolt flying back home. And the other thing is on the factory mags, they're translucent, so you can see how many rounds you have from a visual standpoint. On the Magpul mags, you get a neat little window on each side. It's very nicely done. And they have indicators too. This one has 20 rounds loaded into it. You can actually visually see the rounds when it gets to a certain point. And then there's a little orange indicator on the spring, and that's an approximate number of rounds. There's 20. I know I loaded 20 in there. And you can see this mark is between 15 and 25. So it's for either side. So that's kind of cool. They did a good job with this. Heckler & Koch does something similar for the 3rd gen HK 416 mags. I don't have one of those. They're very difficult to get to in America. And so this one, as you can see, it looks like it's not loaded, but you pull it out and there's 10 rounds in here. It's obstructed by the magazine well. So you just got to be aware. When you shoot enough, you can actually feel the weight of the weapon with the magazine. And if you really want to, you can pull the mag out and inspect how many rounds are in there. Magpul mags, lock right in. So they look fine with the weapon. The black's very close to the HK black. Just a little bit lighter. The only issue I've had was with I used to have an Ambidextrous magazine release on this G36K, or SL8 rather, it's a conversion, same thing. And so the magazine release would come out to here, and you can use your finger to remove it. The magazine release was dimensionally different for both that feature and just a little bit up here where it catches the magazine. And it would actually drop loaded mags at the range. Obviously there's differences in these with the HK mags. And it was just embarrassing. They would, drop the mag, and thank goodness I wasn't actually using the weapon for defensive means or anything serious. But it would drop the mag and it would slide forward, and then you had to stop shooting. You had to, clear the range and have people get the mag for you. That was just embarrassing. So it does not seem to do it on this type of magazine release. It only happened with the other magazine release. That other magazine release I referred to was the Ambidextrous magazine release, and these magazines are fine with that. They seem to be a little sharper. On the rear, you can see where they both catch here and here. This seems to be a little sharper, and I've talked to some people, and they say you can take a file and kind of get this edge to be a little more crisp, but I don't like to have to do that. So I just ended up not using these for that reason, and also the weaker magazine springs. I've had issues with these holding the bolt to the back. When you're shooting on the last round, I'll demonstrate here. Mag in there. Pull the bolt back. The last round, it stays open. So that's by design. When you do it manually, that seems to always work, but with this magazine, while shooting, sometimes it doesn't lock the bolt back to the rear in the last round, which isn't a huge deal, but to some people it is, and I do like it when it locks to the rear, just so I can feel it when I'm shooting that it's empty. Some people can't. It's just something, again, you just get used to it with shooting. Most G36 mags have these lugs on the sides. A lot of people don't like that because they can catch on pouches along with the rim. The PMAGs don't have that issue. They don't have any lugs. The HK does make mags. Here's one that doesn't have the lugs. HK also makes mags that does not have the rim on the side. I have a few of those. Those are nice. They all work great. So that's one thing. PMAGs are a little cheaper than G36 mags. I would have to say these you can get around 25, 30 at the highest. These you can get, I would say at the lowest, 30 to 35. So they're a little more expensive, but I would recommend buying these over these. These are fun just to have because they're US, and also this counts as 3 922R parts if you're concerned about that, having 6 or however many parts you're supposed to have on non-NFA G36s, so that's something people like. The only differences I've found is the newer PMAGs have a tan or brown follower and spring retainer on the bottom. Don't know why. The older ones had gray. It's just a cosmetic thing. Who knows why. That's really all I can think of between the two mags. You know, they both look good. These work okay. I just wouldn't recommend them for serious use. The feed lips are great. I've never had an issue. One thing that I like more about these is the feed lips are very robust. I've never had them crack or break. I have had G36 magazine feed lips break, and all the ones I've had break were all the same date code. They were early mags, so I don't know if it's just a slightly different material. I've had them crack and retain their shape, so that I've actually never had a stoppage related to them cracking because I found the crack and pulled the mags out of service, which is always good. Whenever you clean your weapon, just take a look, inspect everything. If something's not quite right, address it, so then you don't have a real problem later on down the road. That applies to everything. Preventative maintenance. I actually still shoot some in my range. I have range magazines that I use just for the range, and they do have some cracks, and they still function fine. It's when they actually break off, that's when they become a problem. So if you have any questions or if you have any experiences you want to share with these mags, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that. So y'all have a good Saturday. Goodbye.